So this is my video, which was requested by my friend Jenny, and she wanted to know how to recover from self-injury. Now there are so many ways to recover from self-harm, and there's not one answer, and there's only things that will work for you in particular, and because self-injury is relevant to the individual, and not every situation is the same, so not every person who is, like, say, a cutter, because that is the most common form of self-injury, although there are other forms like biting and cutting, biting and burning and punching and hitting and pulling hair. There's no one way that they feel, like all those people feel at the same time. Like every urge that they get. So really it's relevant to the individual person, and they can only really find what works for them. But first step in recovery is acceptance, and that's the same for all addictions, for anything like drugs, alcohol, anything like that. So yes, the first step is to accept that there is a problem. And I was in denial for a while. I mean, I think everyone does go through a stage of denial with their self-injury, and you've got to, as well, for the next step as well, you should have to want to get help, because I went a long time, even going through therapy, I went through a long time of not wanting help, not really wanting to recover from self-injury. So self-injury was I saw it as something that was the only good thing that I had, the only control that I had. So, and I think as well, I'm not sure, but I was reading through papers from a meeting that I had at school when I was in year 8 or 9, end of year 8 probably. And it was just, it read like it was so forced, and that, I mean, one of the things on it was one of the aims for the next meeting, which was like 3 or 6 months later or something like that, or maybe even less than that, and it was to have stopped self-harming. I was in a rut with my self-harm then. I was right at the beginning of my self-injury journey, and I was self-harming every day, probably 2 times a day sometimes. So I think that's another thing. I think I was getting pressured. I probably felt like I was getting pressured into recovery, and I don't think it was until I went into the unit and it was more, I'd had that massive downfall, and then things were starting to look a bit more positive, and I was getting help from loads of people, so it was widening my understanding of what was going on for me. So that allowed me to sort of say, no, this isn't what I want, and I can't go on living like this any longer. I mean, you are sort of forced when you're going into a unit to stop, not fully, because no one stops fully when they're in a unit, especially, but because there's a limitation on what you can have, what you get, and what you can get hold of, it makes it harder to self-harm, so it makes it easier to work with therapists and stuff, because they're breaking that cycle. I mean, if you go from home and go into an inpatient unit, and at home you've been self-harming every day, several times a day, and you go into a unit and you can't self-harm, and there'll be like periods of self-harm in between and stuff, then yeah, it's gonna change your mindset. Self-harm, like any addiction, produces adrenaline, so that heightens your sense, and there is a much safer way that we don't seem to be thinking of. I mean, if you have depression, it masks everything, and you lose all sense of what is enjoyable, or what has been enjoyable, or what could be enjoyable. So you're not seeing that exercise is a possibility in a much healthier way, and you're keeping fit, and you're getting the same adrenaline rush, and honestly, when you exercise, it makes you feel happier than any time you have self-harmed in your life, honestly. Another one that I've got down on my list, I have to write down my ideas, because otherwise I'd forget, and this would be a really weird video, and I'd be just like blah blah blah. So yeah, if you haven't seen my video on my channel about the toolbox, then go and see it, because it's like, I mean, I've got my box behind me, but there's a video right there that shows you practically everything that's in it, and there's a few things that have been added to it though, from Christmas, but they're probably some of the things that were in my Christmas present video. Can't think of the word. A calendar. Calendars are good because they can keep track of when you've not self-harmed. To be honest, I do it with both. I do it when I have self-harmed and when I haven't self-harmed. So I put a smiley sticker on the day when I haven't self-harmed, and a sad sticker on the day that I have self-harmed. So it keeps track of when I know where I'm up to with my recovery. If I've got say 7 days, and then like one episode of self-harm, and then like 8 days. If you want, I'll do another video about that if you want me to, but please just if you want to know more about the calendar thing, then either comment below or inbox me or write on my Facebook page. So yeah, I will do one if you want me to. Isolation. That's not good. Believe it or not, you may think that being alone for hours on end is helping you, but in fact it's making you worse. And I used to think, okay, it's so much better if I just stay in my room away from everyone for the day. I'm feeling like crap, so why should I put that on them? And I can do my own thing. But you do end up, like, you ruminate more, which it means that you're just thinking, and thoughts get bigger and bigger, and you get more thoughts, and they can get intrusive, and then that can eventually lead to like, it's really bad if you're really depressed and you have suicidal thoughts, because then they can become intrusive, and you don't want that. You don't want intrusive suicidal thoughts. Ruminating isn't going to make them any easier than it is. But this is self-harm, and suicide is completely unrelated to self-harm, as I'll talk about in another video. So yeah. Self-harm, it doesn't help with self-harm urges. Self-harm urges will get stronger if you're alone, and you will end up self-harming more frequently because you are alone, and because you probably think, I'm alone, then I can do it more, I can self-harm more. No, please don't think like that, guys. Like, that's not healthy. If you get an urge, please just go and spend time with people that love you and that care about you, because even if you don't speak to them, sometimes just being there can help loads. I mean, I have days when I'm feeling really crap, and I'll just go downstairs and I'll just sit downstairs, and even if I don't talk to my family and I'm just there, I'm just quiet, it's better than sitting in my room being upset. And they can force conversation on you as well, so you could start thinking about I don't know, something that happened at school. That's a really cliche answer. Something that your parents would ask you. Art's a great one. Art's a good outlet, and you can just be free, and it doesn't have to be like a masterpiece. It could be a few scribbles on a page. Even if you just get a pad and you just scribble, it's releasing that energy, that negative energy that you have in yourself. Writing's a good one as well, because you just write down your feelings, like, or read poetry, write poetry. I used to write poetry. I'm quite upset because I haven't wrote poetry in ages, because I haven't had the inspiration. And to be honest, allowing yourself to cry, music, I would say just listen to music that just wants you to get up and dance and just be crazy, and I don't know, just really upbeat tunes. But from experience, whenever people told me that, I just didn't want to do that, and I still really don't. If I'm in a bad place in my mindset, then I want to listen to music that reflects that. So I'm not going to tell you to go and listen to upbeat music unless that's what you want to do, because personally I found it was better to listen to music that was reflected in how I felt, and that enabled me to cry. It's not impossible like you think it is, and those urges aren't going to go away, and it's not going to be like a straight line in recovery. It's never going to be like that. It's going to be more of a curve. So don't feel bad if you do get dips, because you will get dips. I'm not saying it's not going to be easy, but it's not going to be straight down either. Not if you're in recovery, it's not. But it will be up and down, and the space in between those down points will get bigger, and you'll become less independent. You'll become less dependent, I mean, on self-injury. But yeah, if you want any more tips on self-injury recovery, then I'm here. Love you guys.